Hey everybody, welcome to Coolbet's preview for 2021 Tim Hortons Briar. I'm Kris Abbott. This is Andrew Hustler Paterson, live from the Briar patch.
The patch.
Yeah.
You know, I figured, Kris, this is a strange year for the Briar. I was actually going to go with an empty patch, but that would have just been too depressing. So it hasn't started yet. We know how much fun the Scotties was. Just for a moment, let's imagine a full patch, winning bets, and an amazing week and a half of curling coming up beginning on Friday in the bubble. Although I will say the ladies raised the bar quite high for the entertainment value. Man, it's going to be great. How good was that, though, last week in Calgary?
It was awesome. Your phone's blowing up over there because we got some big news from you today as well. Maybe we'll touch on that before we go. But, man, it was so good. And, you know, we know that they're calling it library curling, and it was super quiet. And you know, people weren't even, you know, coaches or spares weren't clapping. And it was really something to behold. And now the men certainly have a big show to live up to. I mean, yeah, I guess before we get into the Briar, your final thoughts from the Scotties.
Well, it was phenomenal. It exceeded all my expectations. And it, you know, in a lot of ways, it was exactly what I think so many people needed. I can tell you, like a lot of us, we've been working from home, many people not working. And to have these games, I mean, it's just the mesmerizing background of curling throughout the day, which I mean was big for me, and I heard it from a lot of people. And then the ability to maybe throw a little sprinkle on a couple of games of the draw got people that much more into it. So it was great. I mean, Carrie Einarson, we talked last Friday going into the championship round that it really did look like we were on a collision course between Homan and Einarson, and you know, Homan had got the best of Carey in the first round. And, you know, I'd sort of thought that maybe that would be different when they met in the final. And that is what happened. But both of them were amazing. And I mean, listen, as a Manitoba guy, I mean, always sort of, you know, naturally biased for our Manitoba teams. But I can't say enough. I mean, we're dudes. I don't know what it's like to be pregnant. I don't have any kids, but, you know, friends have been around. And you see that's all. For Rachel Homan to do what she did at 7 months pregnant was an athletic feat that I still can't get over. But it was amazing. My personal betting MVP, you will not be surprised, Sensational Sherry from Saskatchewan. She was phenomenal. And, you know, so much of it was about these exciting young teams and all this young talent. And then you have a wily vet like that shows it in a game of curling. You don't necessarily – experience matters, especially in events like that. And you know what? I think we saw that a lot in that championship round. And, you know, the experience that Carrie Einarson learned getting to the precipice of winning and all those disappointments, finally getting to the top last year, I think it really helped them. And as I said, it was phenomenal, and it sets up for – what should be a great week beginning on Friday back in the bubble.
No substitute for experience. We saw that with Jennifer Jones's team when she got down. She dragged that team as far as she could. And then we saw teams that maybe surprised some people in, you know, especially the team from Quebec, the lack of experience maybe getting them at the end of it. I even heard the girls exclaim like, oh my God, we're playing Rachel Homan, or that's Carrie Einarson. So, I mean, it was pretty cool to see. Oh, they were just amazing. We could do a whole show on Laurie St. George for sure. I mean, she's if Curling Canada and the World Curling Tour know what's good for them, they'll be making her the face of a lot of advertising campaigns, I think.
Well, you know what? I mean, at a certain point, you got to win. But, you know, they did a lot of that this week. And that's how you make fans. That's how you probably attract more sponsors. And that's how you build going forward. I mean, think of the future ahead for that team in a province that, you know, certainly has
absolutely
curlers, but you know, I think we'll be seeing a lot of the St. George rink in the very near future, as well as some of the other young teams. And we talked about Mackenzie Zacharias. They had, you know, it took them a little while, I think, to get comfortable with playing in that environment. And again, that wasn't even with fans. But the future of Canadian curling on the women's side is incredibly bright. But ladies like Sherry show that, you know, Jen Jones as well. You know, the experience counts as well, and anyone can win. And we did see some huge upsets at times, Kris, in the Scotties. You know, the first weekend was sort of like heavy chalk, and we saw some huge numbers. And then, a team like St. George, shocking teams winning at plus 600 in one matchup. So it is definitely whetted the appetite for what is to come beginning on Friday night.
Well, that's right. We're not here to talk about the Scotties anymore, but thank you very much to all the women who did such an outstanding job. We move now, beginning Friday night, to the Tim Hortons Briar. And you talk about experience. You talk about teams that have been there before. We have got a ton of returning teams from last year and previous years. A lot of name recognition in this Briar. You've got the favorite in Brad Gushu from Newfoundland and Labrador, who will be representing Team Canada. You've got Kevin Cooy, who's a wild card. I know we talked about this before, and his outright odds have jumped. A lot of early action on Kevin Cooey's rink. Obviously, Brad Jacobs' team from Northern Ontario, Brendan Botcher, coming off 3 runner-up finishes. Mike Mcewen's outstanding. John Epping's team, representing Ontario, they opened at around plus 450, plus 500. Now down to plus 750, and that's no slight on them. It's just that the action has been coming in on the other teams. Matt Dunstone, who was there last year, Jason Gunlawson, who was there last year. The wily veteran, Glenn Howard, 13-1. Jim Cotter's rink out of BC, James Grattan's rink out of New Brunswick. We've seen all of these teams before, and then you see some of the longer shots going down the list. I don't know the McDonald skip for Nova Scotia, but I do know Paul Fleming is on his team, and Paul Fleming's been to the Briar, more times than Vic Router, I would think. He's been there that many times. So obviously super, super exciting about what's coming up. And I guess we just had a look at those outright odds, Hustler. I'll ask you, who is your pick before the first rock is thrown?
Well, when you look at the odds, very similar to what we did in the Scotties, you kind of see that there's that group of the super elites, the ones that were there last year, some other teams that you might think might be able to get into the mix of the championship round and potentially go on a heater, and then a bunch of others that are real long shots. And, I'm not surprised that Brad Gushu, the defending champion representing Canada, is the favorite. And, you could probably speak to this as well, Kris. One of the big questions going into the Scotties was just the fact that these teams hadn't played. They had not played very much, and you wonder what you were going to get from each team. And I think Gushu's even more of a favorite now because of the fact that Newfoundland has been in a much better spot COVID-wise. And from the sounds of it, those guys have been able to throw rocks probably more than some of the others. What's been very interesting is to see all the money coming in on Kevin Cooey and how that number has dropped since we looked at the odds earlier this week. And of course the Jacobs. But if I'm going to look at a team of those top 4, I think it's Botcher's time. And I know there's an odd, I know there's a line on Coolbet right now. Will they get a 4th straight silver medal at plus 400?
Which the team asked for, by the way.
Yeah,
they asked for that.
I saw it on Twitter. It was amazing. I mean, those guys have, the class that Botcher handled some of the trials and the ups and downs over the last couple of years has really been honorable. And they've made so many fans along the way with the brilliant curling and the way they've handled it. I think even as a Manitoba guy, there's a real soft spot for him. But I'm kind of taking a bit of a different approach on this one. And, we could give you reasons why Cooey or certainly Brad Jacobs and Gushu could win. But I'm going a little bit off the board, at least of those top 4. And I'm putting my support behind 2 teams. First of all, Mike Mcewen. And they come in as wildcard number 1. Now, the Mcewen rink, especially, with Reed Carruthers there, who's a great friend of our program. We've talked to both of those guys a long time here in Winnipeg. They have both been elite at the top of, the World Curling Tour standings over the course of the last 3 and 4 years. They did have a bit of a shakeup of the team. When it comes down to it, Mike Mcewen's one of the most talented curlers on the planet. They've got a great squad. And I don't know why. I just feel like the weirdness of this year and the fact that they haven't been playing might actually be a real benefit for Mike Mcewen. I mean, the great thing is, and when we'll look at these draw odds, I can give you a reason why every one of these teams could beat the other team at any point. So when I look at what's happened to the Mcewen odds going down to 7-1 over the course of the last 3 days, I believe he opened at around 550. I think people are sleeping on the Mike Mcewen rink a little bit. So I'm going with Mcewen at 7-1. I think certainly there's the best value. I think that he probably deserves to be in that 4 to 5 range along with some of those other teams. So the outright pick right off the top is Mike Mcewen, but I do have another team that I think has another great chance to win, and I'm really surprised that they're at double digits, and that's the Matt Dunstone team out of Saskatchewan. They were brilliant last year, and Dunstone is a Winnipeg guy, but he emigrated, put the green on a couple years ago, and to me, he was maybe the breakout star of last year's Brier. You remember some of those shots that he made at the end of games. I mean, you realize that he had the moxie of a Skip and the experience from his junior days, and maybe more importantly, when you're going up against a field like this, the confidence that, he's as good as everybody else in the field and can win. He played in the 1-2 game last year. Lost in the 2-3 game after the playoffs and had a disappointing end. But I think the Dunstone rink showed absolutely they are ready for prime time. I think he'll be better a year later. And I'll be honest, the minute I saw them at 10-1 when the odds came out, I jumped on them. So I was disappointed to see it go to 11. Had to top it up a little bit to make up for it. But I think the Dunstone rink will be in the playoffs. We'll talk about that in a minute. And will contend for the title. So the two picks that I like kind of value-wise, as well as having a real chance to be there on that final Sunday, Mcewen at 7-1 and Matty Dunstone and the Saskatchewan rink at 11-1.
Okay, I mean, yeah, and I think this leans to what we were talking about. Like, those top teams are there for a reason at the top of the board, but there's a lot more depth in this field than we saw in the Scotties field. And listen, I'm for my outright winner, I've got to go a little bit with the heart, but a little bit with the math. And our pals at Team Epping here that we sponsor with Coolbet. First of all, I'd probably be kicked out of the Team Epping family if I was not going to predict this. So I know the boys are probably going to watch later on and want to make sure that I have my support for John, Ryan, Matt, and Brent and Coach Jim as well. So it's a team that started last year's Brier really, really hot. They had a couple of bad losses in the middle of the round robin, and then they were playing from behind when they got to the playoffs, and they got into one of those situations where you had to rip off 5 straight wins against the best teams, and they just ran out of gas. But this is a team that was ranked second in the world in the World Curling Rankings last season. They've already got a berth in the Canadian Olympic trials. So, to get a team with all that pedigree at plus 750, you got an Olympic gold medalist in Ryan Fry. You've got Brent Lang, who's won everything there is to win in the sport, and just an all-world personality and shot maker like John. So I'm certainly going to take those guys at plus 750. And if they can't win, I was at the Brier last year, and I watched Brendan Botcher's team. They ran right through the round robin, and they came up a little bit short. But all week, they were the best team on the ice. And, they've certainly got something to prove. I mean, they're poking fun at themselves, asking for odds in the 4th straight silver medal. But, I mean, how many times do we see that a team needs to get to the dance before they can finally break through? Well, these guys have been to the dance a few times, and Stairway to Heaven's about to come on, I think. So they're going to want to get it done. And at plus 450, I think that's a pretty good number for them.
Yeah, I see a lot of similarities in the Botcher rink to sort of the path that the Kerry Einerson rink went, and obviously it finished now with 2 straight national championships last year and then repeating this season. They've proven that they are elite, top of the class. And this is the thing about curling is there's no guarantees. I mean, one shot, one nick, 1 millimeter can be the difference between a big end, giving up a steal, and really can change everything. So, I mean, and this is the thing, at this level, the margin of error is so thin. And, the teams that are the most consistent will give them the best chances to win. That was certainly Brendan Botcher last year. And as we talked about last week, these early games in the round robin are so important because the losses carry over to the next round. And, we saw it. I mean, it's great to make it into the championship round, but if you're doing it in 4th spot with 3 losses already, you're putting yourself in a situation where not only do you have to run the table and beat all of the elite teams from the other group, but you might need some help as well. So these early matchups and who kind of handles the first few games, even though it might be difficult with the lack of preparation, are going to be crucial when it comes to putting yourself in a position to not have to go on that miracle run of winning 4 or 5 straight to actually get the thing done.
Yeah, and I mean, again, approaching this from a complete gambling perspective, right? I mean, I think there's plenty of opportunity for Jacobs, Gushue, Cooey to win this event. But just from a pure value perspective, this is where, these are looking pretty good as futures bets. I think maybe, you can do better than plus 300 on Kevin Cooey if you bet on him throughout the event. Now, we talked about, kind of what we'd consider, these big money teams, these teams that are, in essence, professional curlers. And we learned a lesson last week about sensational Sherry Anderson, and that you can never be too old to make a run at a national title. And without the grueling season, maybe leading to injuries and some fatigue or what have you, could one of the best to ever do it in Glenn Howard make a run in this tournament? I know it's highly unlikely. I know he doesn't have the same team he had when he was winning all those championships, 10 years ago, but he's still Glenn Howard, and he's 13-1. And I think that's got to be worth just a little bit of a sprinkle, just in case, just so you could say you had Glenn Howard's team pre-tournament. And I'll put a little bit on there. Again, living in Ontario, I'm definitely pandering, but hey, you did it too. So
yeah, well, and you know what? While we're at it, I'll just throw in our pal gunner, Jason Gunlickson, who actually will be representing Manitoba because he was the champ last year. Mike Mcewen got in on a Brier. He's at 13-1. That's a number that's come down from 11, I believe, on opening day. And to me, listen, Cotter could maybe make the championship round. It's tough to imagine the BC team winning the whole thing. But I think once you get down to, Howard and Gunlickson at 13, that's about as low as you could go for a realistic shot of winning it. But as we saw in the Scotties, there's a pretty good chance that the cream will rise to the top. But I just think as we talked about, Chris, there's enough teams that deserve to be in the conversation. How people bet on it will be up to them, and that will determine what the odds are. But I think you can make a pretty good argument that some of the teams that are a little longer outside of that elite top 4, do have a chance to be in the mix. And, as we talked about, the way they start could really play a huge factor into how they finish.
And that's why I think there's some good value on some other markets that we've opened up at Coolbet as well. And that's to make the championship round. So that's to be top 4 in your division, or to make the playoffs, which for the first time ever, we see after the championship round, but just like the Scotties, team goes directly to the final, and the other 2 teams play playoff second and third. So 3 teams make the playoffs. And when you're looking at this board, any teams maybe that you think you could make some real money on here pre-tournament by betting them to finish in the top 3?
Well, I'm going to go back to one of my early picks, and that is the Dunstone rink. I think that Matty Dunstone is absolutely capable of winning the whole thing. Never mind getting to the playoffs. I think they'll, I think all the experience they had last year is going to really put them in a good position right from the get-go to be one of, to be a contender in that group, as well as going into the championship round. And, they were there last year. I see no reason why they can't do it again. And at plus 260, I think that is just, some phenomenal value. Now, I put Gunlickson in at plus 350. In that, he's a bit of a wild card, but when he gets hot, he's a very, very tough guy to beat. We saw that in the Manitoba Championships a couple years when he went all the way and finally won Manitoba and qualified for the Brier. He knows these teams. I mean, all these teams for the most part, not as much this year, but they're familiar with each other. There's a level of confidence. I mean, he's not the young gun anymore, a little bit older, a little bit more experienced, and he's a guy that could catch fire. Now, listen, and I know you're going to talk about Botcher in a minute. At plus 115, to me, that might be the safest and best bet you could have. I mean, he's done it year after year after year. Getting plus money on that is, certainly on the value. Makes a lot of sense. But when I look at the Dunstone rink, at plus 260, I jumped at that. And, looking for maybe a little more of a long shot as opposed to some of the chalkier guys at the top, don't sleep on Gunner and Jason Gunlickson to get into that championship round. And he had the shot of the tournament last year. I know he's probably got a couple more of those. Maybe wouldn't want to put himself in a situation where he had to make a shot like that. But I'll tell you what, he's ready for prime time. And there will be a little sprinkle on Gunner to make things happen, both in the group stage, draw by draw. And if they're in the championship, once they get to that playoff round, maybe to make some noise going into Sunday.
Was there anyone outside the kind of the top 8 that we consider that you think might sneak into the championship round?
Well, I guess the Gunlickson is interesting because they're sort of in a group where there's 4 really, really strong teams. So basically you're talking about knocking off one of those group teams beforehand, but certainly, I mean, that's possible. And then again, what we really can't, account for is that we know there's going to be a wild upset or two. That is curling. I mean, one of these top teams are going to fall asleep or, have 1 or 2 bad ends. And it could be a loss that, is the difference in a really tightly competitive group for making it in or making it out. So Gunlickson is sort of at the end. And I mean, your guy, Glenn Howard, to me, that's sort of where we get we get to the end of the group that, we're talking about championship round or potentially in the playoffs. I guess if you wanted to give Jim Cotter a bit of a sprinkle, the Cotter group to make it to the champions pool is even money at 1-1. And again, it would take an upset of one of the ranked teams above them, but it's not like that's not uncommonplace to happen in the Brier and in the, in the Scotties when you have this many elite teams. But I just keep coming back to the Dunstone rink as far as, potentially making to that championship round. And I do like Gunlickson at -167 to be one of the final 4 moving on to at least play in the champions round, not necessarily make it to the playoffs.
You can take this to the bank that Jim Cotter and James Grattan are going to have an upset win that you don't see coming this week, because those guys have been there enough. They've done it enough. They're capable enough. And in a year where they're not being, I won't say outclassed, but when these other teams are playing on the World Tour every single weekend against the Nicholas Edins and everyone else on the very, very top of their game, they're coming into the Brier a lot sharper than the New Brunswicks, than the Quebecs, than the other teams that don't play on the tour. So you can be sure that James Grattan is going to pull at least one upset. Jim Cotter will be right there too. It'll be a struggle for them to get into those rounds, but you can be sure that there's a huge money line upset coming from one of those teams, or actually both of them, before the week's over. But for me, going into the championship pool in the playoffs, again, I'm going to ride with my guys from Team Epping for sure to get into the playoffs. You're getting some value on them. Brad Jacobs' team at -118. Like, I feel like I might put a lot of money on that for them to make it into the final 3. Like, when that team is on, when Mark Kennedy is playing as good as he can, I mean, he's as good as anyone. I don't know if there's anyone as good. Him and Mark Nichols at the 3rd position, Ryan Fry as well. When these guys are hitting their shots, I mean, they just clean up all the messes that happened earlier in the end, and they make it so hard to beat a team like that. So for Northern Ontario, -118 to make the playoff round, I like it. And again, Botcher, we had already talked about it a bit, but at +115, the Cooeys, the Gushus, the value is not really there to bet on them in these markets. So that's why we're looking outside.
Botcher auto bet at plus money to make that the playoff round. And I will ask you, I mean, just maybe before we get into the draws, speak, Kris, if you could, to some of the line movement. I talked a little bit about Dunstone and Gunlickson, and you mentioned Epping with a pretty big drop, way more value now than when the odds came out. But there's been a huge push on Kevin Cooy. He's now the 2nd favorite at 3-1. But what I find is quite interesting, Cooy to wins at 3-1. Jacobs is +330. And yet when you look at the odds to make the champions pool, Jacobs is -1,000, and yet Cooey is still at -667. So it seems like maybe some part of the line hasn't caught up to all the action on Cooey to actually win the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, not that you're going to probably lay a $667 bet, but yeah, I mean, there are going to be spots where the book has no choice but to leave some value on somebody. And when you get into the big odds like that, I mean, I don't know that anyone's going to be playing it, but yeah, you're right. When you compare it to the outrights, it certainly makes a difference. But when it comes to the line movement, I mean, you got a Kevin Cooey team that is very well known nationally. So the public is going to bet on them. They've added John Morris to the regular rotation this year. Morris was Epping's 5th at last year's Brier. So, you got some, Kevin Cooey and John Morris and Ben Hebert on that team. Like these guys have got all the hardware, all of it. And I can see why when they opened at around 5-1, that was an automatic bet for a lot of people.
Johnny Mo's the best. I mean, you want to talk about just characters of curling. And of course, he won, with Caitlin Laws and the mixed doubles at the Olympics. But he to me just epitomizes what the game is all about. Not afraid to maybe mix it up in the patch with some fans afterwards. But when he's out on the ice, you know that the dude is nails. And, maybe one of the great, I don't know if they really have free agents in curling, but when he finishes his career and you look at what he's done nationally, internationally, as well as all the teams that he's contributed to in Brier history, his name is going to be up there with one of the best on the ice. And I think there's a lot of people in the curling community would say absolutely one of the best off the ice.
Absolutely. Without telling tales out of school, I had an opportunity last year to spend some time at the Brier with John and his father and with Dom Bartlett. And I just sat there like a student in school. I just listened, soaked it all in. It was very, very cool. I must say that was it was one of the cool things. And that's one of the things we'll miss. We're supposed to be Kelowna, right? For this year's Brier. So, hopefully we'll get that trip in soon. But
missing this. Right now.
Yeah, exactly. And for me personally, that was the last thing I did in a group of people. I think we talked about this already on a previous podcast, but that was the last thing I did was hang out in the patch in Kingston. And if I had known, I remember my last night there, I went home a little bit early because I knew we had to leave in the morning and I was feeling tired. And I wish I had known, I would have extended the trip another day. That's for sure.
Tell me about it. Now, do we know, is it going to be back in Kelowna next year, or is that still sort of up in the air?
I'm not sure. I wouldn't want to say. I'm sure if they were awarded the event, they're going to be given the opportunity to host whether it's in Kelowna or whether it's elsewhere, let's try and make a date to get the band together and get to Brier. I've been to it here in Manitoba, and, up until now, it's been very difficult to take off at a busy time reporting it here in Winnipeg, but having a bit more freedom and flexibility going forward with what we're doing together, that would be an absolute dream. And man, would that be fun, because, as great as it is to watch it on TSN and the amazing coverage that we have all day long, there's really nothing like being a part of these big Canada curling events on the women's or the men's side, and both watching the incredible action on the ice, as well as taking in everything that really the Brier is all about. And that's getting together with people, and the athletes make it, such a big part too, because they realize the importance of the fans to the game and make a point of, as incredible as the game has gone and how advanced maybe the athletes are as opposed to they were 10, 15, 20 years ago, they still know what makes curling the heartbeat of so many communities across Canada. And it comes out in the Brier patch. Unfortunately, this year that won't be the case, but I know that the action on the ice is going to keep everybody tuned in right to that final rock on Sunday night. You can believe we're going to be there. We're going to be at the Scotties, and I've been asking everybody who I can to make sure that they have that tour event in Vegas that was postponed this year as well. So as long as that gets back on the calendar, you'll see the boys rolling into McCarran International for sure. And make a week. I don't know if we'll see any curling on that trip, but we'll certainly pretend like we did.
Just thinking about that is getting me excited. But, I guess we do have to wait. Things are progressing in a good direction. Surely by next year with these events, we'll be good to go, right?
I hope so. Listen, I do want to just touch on your point, though, about the accessibility of the players at these events. Like, if you went to the Stanley Cup final, if you went to the Super Bowl, if you went, to the NBA finals, et cetera, no way after the game are the players coming in and standing around in, a pop-up tent across the street in the parking lot to have a beer with you. It's not going to happen and give you all the time in the world. It's amazing to me that when the casual fan, and I love the curling atmosphere because it's so respectful. The fans will come up and say, "Hey, I thought you played great. Really enjoy watching you." And, they'll share a few moments and have a drink together and then, move along and not monopolize the athlete's time. Just really respect, that they're there to say hello, and they do have other things to do while we're there enjoying the party. But I mean, it really does say something about that kind of athlete that curling breeds.
Oh, Kris, there's no doubt about it. To me, I mean, there are two sort of events. Well, we'll combine one that are true Canadiana. That if you are a Canadian sports fan, that you need to take part in. One is the Brier Scotties. Get to one of these national curling events, spend a week there, go to the draws, be a part of it. And the other is Grey Cup. And Grey Cup, you will see some of the players in and around the host city, leading up to the game, when you get closer to game day and the weekend. Usually, the coaches prefer that the guys aren't out as much. But there really isn't anything like it. And it's really unfortunate that there won't be fans. It will be different this year. But I'll tell you what, I think when we get back to normal next season, it's just going to make the fun and frivolity in the garden and the patch much better. And, I think sometimes you need to lose things to appreciate it that much more. I think we've heard it from the curlers appreciating what the fans meant, and not just in curling, in all sports. I mean, we're listening to, some of these, we're seeing all this incredible action in the Canadian North Division right now with all the excitement, the intensity of these games, and still no fans. So it'll be a different sports world when we come back to it. But the one thing, regardless of COVID, once we get back to it, the heartbeat of Canadian curling is in the patch, and it will be back, and it will be better than ever. I hope we're there having a couple together.
Oh, we will be there. No, it's a done deal. Don't you worry about it. It's already taken care of. I think I still got some drink tickets left over from the last one. Not sure that I'll be allowed to use them, but anyway, listen, the two of us could ramble on about this because I think the passion comes out and how much we love it. But the odds for the first couple of draws are up. And I know you've had some time to look at it, as have I. Obviously, the marquee matchup, the game that's on TV on draw one, is John Epping against Brad Gushu, and the odds are real tight for that one. Actually, have just moved. Whoa. Epping was minus 105, now plus 105. I was going to, getting Brad Gushu, he was minus 125. That's a really, really good price for him, even if it is against my friends with Team Epping. But I'm just wondering, Huss, have you had a chance to put anything together for the first couple of draws? I
have. You know what? I really just focused in on draw number one, wanted to get a little parlay to get going for Friday night. And I will advise people, like in the Scotties, maybe just sort of take it slow, kind of like week one in the NFL. We don't really know exactly what's going to happen. Don't blow your brains out in week number one. But I have looked at it, and I'm going to pick all the games, four-way parlay. Now, Saskatchewan is a massive favorite. They're going up against, I believe, Nunavut. Rarely would I lay 3.5 on the rock line, but in this case, I think with a shot maker like Matt Dunstone, they'll be in a position to put up some crooked numbers. And I like them to really to remind everybody who the team was that was in that 1-2 game last year, and that they are back. So I will do that. Minus 3.5. That's at minus 147. Again, I was looking at it before, and I think I leaned into Gushu a little more because of that number. I was surprised that it was only minus 125. So when I did this, it was minus 125, a little bit less right now, minus 139. Quebec on the money line at minus 250. And I'll put Cooy on there. I can't imagine him losing. Sometimes I'm loath to lay, a minus 500 favorite into a parlay just to juice it up a little bit. But we want to touch all the bases for draw one of the Brier. So Cooey's getting in there at minus 500. It was plus 408 when I made it. Probably about 4-1 right now with the change in the Gushu number. But overall, we're going to go 3 money lines, and Dunstone with a big win on the rock line in draw number one. Started off, hopefully get a 4-1 winner, and put it all into the draw on Saturday.
Get it all going for Hustlers Hurry Hard Parlay. I love it. Okay, now one thing we learned, because really we didn't know what to expect with the 18-team structure in the Scotties, but we learned, hey, Pool A goes, then Pool B goes, and vice versa. So Coolbet will always have the lines up for 8 games. The next Pool A, the next Pool B. So that means draw 1 and 2, and that's what I dipped into to make my picks for, I'll call it day one, even though it's going to be Friday night and Saturday morning. And I'm going to start with a John Epping Rock Line parlay. And I'm just going to put that with a Brendan Botcher money line. And I put the Mike Mcewen money line in there to bring it back up over plus 112. Oh, no, this is a different one. I've got two picks, and I got it messed up.
Cowards parlay.
It's the Cowards parlay. The Cooy, Botcher, Mcewen money line parlay is the one that I did see. I listen, I'm trying to promote Team Epping as much as I can, and I got it mixed up. So this is my money line parlay again. 3 big faves. I stayed away from the Gushue Epping game in terms of a money line play, because I do think that can go either way. Think it'll be close. Epping team gave Gushue a great game last year, and that's where my second play comes in. It was Gushue plus 1.5, and I had another play in there. And if producer Pat can put it on the screen for me, I don't have my notes in front of me, but anyhow, let's see if that graphic flicks. Maybe it didn't get up. Maybe it's still in my email. Hang on, but I want to make sure everyone knows what I picked. I don't want to.
Oh yeah, I got it right here. It was the Cooey money line and Epping plus 1.5 on the Rock Line, which came together at minus 112.
That's why I got mistaken. Yeah, the Cooey money line with Epping plus 1.5. I got thrown off by my Cowards parlay. It's been a busy time here at Coolbet headquarters. So yeah, a little bit of a let's do another take on that. My other play is going to be John Epping plus 1.5 and a Kevin Cooey money line at plus 112, and that'll be my play for the day. And we can edit that out of the other version, or leave it in there to make me look on.
Wonders of technology, Chris. The wonders of technology.
All right. So again, we've rambled on. We don't want to go too much longer. Thanks to everyone who has tuned in. But I do want to know, you've been talking a lot about Team Matt Dunstone, and I want to know if they're going to have a Winnipeg Sports Talk package on their a patch on their uniforms, because you, sir, have launched a brand new endeavor, and while you've got the captive audience, I want to hear more about it.
Yeah, you know what? I really appreciate that, Chris. For many people that, follow me or know me from here in Winnipeg, unfortunately, I guess it was almost a month to the day, sort of shocking news where they shut the station down. And, the outpouring of support from people here in this community and then followers and people we've dealt with across the country has been amazing, and just been really working hard to try to, get this going again, because the demand is huge for it. So today, Michael Reeves and I announced the launch of Winnipeg Sports Talk. It's a YouTube channel. We'll have podcast feeds. We'll be starting with the daily show beginning on Monday called Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. And right now, if you can follow our account on Twitter at Sports Talk WPG, or go to winnipegsports.com for all the links. But we will be talking curling next week. I've already got a couple of the guys. Jason Gunlison shot me a text, said, hey, we should do something next week. Ted Wyman, who covers the game for the Sun. So we will have some Brier coverage next week, but it's just it's been humbling for the reaction of the announcement today. We'll work hard to get it going for Monday, and we'll certainly be doing daily lines with Coolbet every day, something I love to do. So we'll be talking curling, hockey, lots of things focusing on what people in Winnipeg are hoping for, which, next week will be a lot of curling. But beyond that, all the big stories, and have some fun with great guys like you. Really looking forward to get going. And just thanks to everyone that's subscribed to the YouTube channel or got the podcast on. It means a lot, and we can't wait to get going.
Well, you know what? It's one of these things, right? We were brought together through the radio station, but it's the content and not the provider that lives on. And you're going to see that with all your sponsors that are sticking with you and not where they were before. And I know you'd never say anything about that, but I sure can. And we're really excited to be part of it. And hey, man, it's 2021. The way content is delivered and the way it is consumed is changing ever quickly. And, you're not going to be on the AM radio dial, but people can get you just as easily. Everyone's got unlimited data now. So, I mean, it should be seamless, I would think.
Yeah, from the sounds of it, I was wondering how many people were going to have to teach how to download a podcast. But from the sounds of it today, not only have been people fired up about that, tons of subs. I mean, we had some goals for our YouTube subs. We blew that in the first hour, and we're trending way beyond what we could have imagined before we even do the first show. So, I mean, you're right. People, like Coolbet, some of our great local sponsors that have been with me since even before we went to the sports talk station for the last 10 years, have stuck by it. So a lot of excitement about that. And what a great week to do it, because I mean, the Jets are going to be going out from Montreal to Toronto for 3 games against the Leafs. Hopefully it'll go better for the Jets than it did for the Oilers. And we've got 3 draws a day of Brier curling. And if there's one city in this great country that eats up every ounce of curling action, it's Winnipeg and the province of Manitoba, and we'll be there for it. So I'll look forward to talking to you about that. And I can guarantee you we'll be including some of the Brier numbers on our Coolbet daily lines when we start on Monday afternoon.
Absolutely love it. And hey, you got nobody to answer to now except yourself and Michael. So it could get wild and woolly. That's going to be a whole lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to this Brier, obviously. Thanks to everybody who took some time to join us today. On behalf of Andrew Hustler Paterson, I am Kris Abbott. Thanks so much. And remember, head over to Coolbet. If you haven't played at Coolbet yet, we're going to plug the WST promo code. That'll double your first deposit over at the site. Thanks so much, everybody, and we'll see you soon.